My name is Natalie, and I'm 34. I watched in stunned silence as my mother-in-law, Rebecca, placed legal documents on our dining table during what was supposed to be a casual Sunday dinner. Just sign here, dear. It's a simple transfer of your company assets to protect them within the family. She smiled sweetly. My husband Jason looked confused, but not surprised enough. That's when I knew my decision to secretly restructure ownership of my $25.6 million tech company before our wedding had been my salvation. I still remember the chill that ran down my spine in that moment. If you've ever had that gut feeling that saved you from disaster, you know exactly what I mean. I'd love to know where you're watching from. And if you've ever had to protect yourself from family betrayal, hit that subscribe button if you want more stories about standing your ground when family loyalty gets complicated. Let me take you back to where it all began. I grew up in Seattle with parents who built a small chain of organic grocery stores from nothing. From my earliest memories, dinner conversations revolved around profit margins, employee management, and expansion strategies. My father, Thomas, would explain business concepts using salt and pepper shakers as visual aids, while my mother, Elaine, taught me to read financial statements before fairy tales. They weren't cold people, just practical ones who believed financial independence was the greatest gift they could give their daughter. When I told them at 18 that I wanted to study computer science instead of business, they supported me completely. Build something of your own, Dad said. Just make sure you're the one who controls it. Those words would save me years later. After graduating from the University of Washington, I worked for 3 major tech companies before identifying a gap in the cybersecurity market. Small to mid-sized businesses needed enterprise-level protection, but couldn't afford the premium solutions. I maxed out 2 credit cards and emptied my savings to launch Aurora Tech from my studio apartment at 26. Those first years were brutal. I slept on a futon next to my desk, showered at a gym to save on water bills, and survived on ramen and determination. My first client was a local dental office that had been ransomware victims. I secured their systems for a fraction of what larger firms charged, and they referred me to other medical practices. That niche became my foundation. By year 3, I had 10 employees and a real office. By year 5, we had developed proprietary security software that became our signature product. When I turned 32, Aurora Tech was valued at $25.6 million with 68 employees, and I was being featured in Seattle Business Monthly as one of the 40 under 40 to watch. That's where Jason Montgomery first saw me. He later told me he read the article 3 times before looking up Aurora Tech's website. He registered for the Pacific Northwest Tech Security Conference where I was speaking specifically to meet me. I noticed him immediately during my presentation. Tall, with dark blonde hair and attentive hazel eyes. He asked the most insightful questions during the queue and afterward. He approached me with a business card. Montgomery Luxury Holdings Director of Digital Operations. His family owned a chain of high-end hotels across the West Coast. Your approach to layered security protocols is exactly what our hotel group needs, he said. Would you consider having dinner to discuss a potential contract? That dinner lasted 4 hours. We barely discussed his hotel security needs. Instead, we discovered shared passions for hiking, obscure documentaries, and terrible sci-fi movies. He was charming, intelligent, and seemed genuinely interested in my journey building Aurora Tech from nothing. Our courtship was a whirlwind. Helicopter rides to remote restaurants, weekend trips to vineyards, and late-night conversations about everything and nothing. 3 months in, he invited me to meet his family at their Seattle mansion overlooking Puget Sound. The Montgomerys were Pacific Northwest royalty. Gerald, Jason's father, had inherited 3 hotels and expanded to 12 luxury properties. Rebecca, his mother, came from old timber money and handled the social connections that kept their business thriving. They had the polished warmth of people accustomed to impressing others. Jason tells us you've built quite the impressive little company, Rebecca said during dinner, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. 2 million, is it? That's wonderful. We should discuss how Aurora might fit into Montgomery Holdings, Gerald added casually. Always looking to diversify, I noticed how they referred to my company as if its absorption into their empire was inevitable. Jason squeezed my hand under the table, seemingly apologetic for his parents' presumption. His sister-in-law Amanda, married to his older brother Ethan, gave me a look I couldn't quite decipher. After that dinner, Jason explained that his parents were old school about business. They see everything as potential for growth. Don't take it personally. But more dinners followed, and so did more questions. How was Aurora structured? Who held the shares? What was my exit strategy? I answered politely but vaguely, increasingly uncomfortable with their interest. Exactly 1 year after we met, Jason proposed at Hurricane Ridge in Olympic National Park, my favorite hiking spot. The ring was platinum with an emerald instead of a diamond. He'd remembered my offhand comment about preferring their color to diamonds. It was perfect and so public, with other hikers cheering and taking photos of us. I said yes without hesitation. Back in Seattle, while Jason dove into wedding planning with his mother, I met with Margaret Bennett, my company's attorney and my mentor. Since the early days of Aurora, I'd brought her the Montgomery Holdings standard prenuptial agreement that Jason had given me. Margaret adjusted her glasses as she read. This is comprehensive for protecting their assets, but notably thin on protecting yours. I trust Jason, I said automatically. Trust is wonderful, Margaret replied. But in my 30 years of practice, I've seen too many entrepreneurs lose everything they built because they didn't legally protect themselves before marriage. Something in her tone made me pause. You think I need to be worried? I think, she said carefully, that the Montgomerys didn't build their empire by leaving money on the table. And I've heard things about how they acquire businesses. That evening, I noticed more messages from Rebecca on Jason's phone about discussing the Aurora integration after the wedding. When I asked Jason about it, he seemed uncomfortable. Mom's just excited about welcoming you to the family. She sees your business acumen as an asset. An asset to what, exactly? To the family, to our future together. He kissed my forehead. Don't worry about it. But I did worry. I remembered more moments. Gerald introducing me to their family financial advisor, who asked probing questions about Aurora's client contracts. Rebecca suggesting I meet with their legal team to streamline things before the wedding. Conversations between Jason and his father that abruptly stopped when I entered rooms. 2 days later, I called Margaret. I need to protect Aurora. Without Jason knowing, Margaret wasted no time. She arranged a meeting at her firm with Harold Winters, financial restructuring specialist, on a day when Jason was traveling to inspect their Portland hotel. What we're discussing doesn't leave this room, Margaret began after introductions. Natalie needs to protect her company before her marriage while maintaining the appearance that nothing has changed. Harold nodded, his expression serious. The Montgomerys have a reputation not illegal, but aggressive. 3 businesses brought into their fold through marriages have disappeared within 5 years. My stomach clenched. Disappeared? How? Assets stripped, patents absorbed into Montgomery Holdings, then shuttered. Very clean, very legal. Assuming the contracts were signed willingly. He gave me a pointed look. Over the next 3 hours, they outlined a plan that made my head spin. We would create a blind trust to hold my majority shares in Aurora Tech, with Margaret as the trustee. The trust would be structured in a way that I couldn't dissolve it without multiple approvals, effectively putting my own assets out of my immediate reach. Additionally, we would establish an offshore holding company in the Cayman Islands that would own the intellectual property rights to Aurora's software. The holding company would license the technology back to Aurora through a complex agreement. That couldn't be broken even if ownership of Aurora changed hands. This creates a firewall, Margaret explained. Even if somehow you were pressured into signing over Aurora, the company's most valuable assets, its proprietary technology, would remain separate and protected. Isn't this overly paranoid? I asked, though the knot in my stomach suggested otherwise. Think of it as an insurance policy, Harold replied. One you hope never to use. We set the plan in motion immediately. For 3 weeks, I juggled wedding planning with secret meetings and late-night document reviews. The guilt weighed on me. I loved Jason and wanted to believe his family's interest was innocent, but something kept pushing me forward with the restructuring. The closest call came when Jason returned early from a business trip and walked in while I was on the phone with Margaret discussing the Cayman Islands holding company. "So the licensing agreement is finalized," I was saying. "And it can't be challenged." Jason set his back down. "What licensing agreement?" I covered the phone. "New client, government contractor, very hush-hush." I forced a smile. "How was your trip?" He seemed to accept my explanation. But that night I lay awake wondering if I was destroying the foundation of our marriage before it even began. Meanwhile, Margaret had prepared a comprehensive prenuptial agreement that protected both parties but made no mention of the restructuring I'd already completed. When I presented it to Jason, he seemed relieved. "I was worried you might be offended by the whole prenup thing," Mom and Dad insisted.
He skimmed the document. "This looks reasonable."
"I'll have our lawyers review it." What surprised me was how quickly the Montgomery legal team approved the prenup. They made only minor adjustments, none related to Aurora Tech. Either they hadn't done their homework, or they had other plans that made the prenup irrelevant. As the wedding approached, I found an unexpected ally in Amanda, Jason's sister-in-law. During a bridal luncheon that Rebecca had organized, Amanda pulled me aside. "You seem smart," she said quietly. "Smarter than I was." "What do you mean?" "Just be careful what you sign after the wedding." Rebecca has a way of presenting things during family moments when it's hard to say no. Before I could ask for clarification, Rebecca swooped in and redirected Amanda to help with the seating arrangements. That brief conversation planted another seed of doubt. That evening, I researched Amanda's background and discovered she'd owned a successful event planning business before marrying Ethan. The business had been absorbed into Montgomery Holdings as their exclusive event services provider and then quietly dissolved 2 years later. Amanda now worked as an employee in the Montgomery Hotel's events department. The wedding planning accelerated, with Rebecca taking control of nearly every detail. Our intimate mountain ceremony somehow evolved into a 400-person extravaganza at the Montgomery's flagship Seattle hotel. I found myself swept along, focused on finalizing the protection of Aurora while smiling through cake tastings and floral arrangements. The night before our wedding, my father pulled me aside at the rehearsal dinner. "You've got that same look you had before your first science fair," he said. "Like you're running calculations instead of enjoying the moment." "Just wedding jitters." I lied. "Natalie, your mother and I taught you to build something of your own, but we also want you to be happy."
He studied my face. "Are you?"
"I love Jason," I said, which was true, but didn't quite answer his question. "That's good, but sometimes love needs reinforcements, like good contracts." He squeezed my shoulder. "Just remember what I taught you. Control what's yours." The wedding day arrived, picture perfect and meticulously orchestrated by Rebecca. Jason looked handsome and genuinely happy as we exchanged vows. During Rebecca's toast at the reception, she clinked her glass and smiled warmly. "We're not just gaining a daughter today," she said, looking at me. "We're welcoming a brilliant businesswoman into our family enterprise. To Jason and Natalie and to the joining of our business empires." As guests applauded, I caught Amanda's eye across the room. She raised her champagne glass slightly, her expression unreadable. I had completed the restructuring just 3 days before the wedding. Aurora Tech was protected, but at what cost to the trust in my new marriage? As Jason and I departed for a honeymoon in the Maldives, that question followed me like a shadow. The Maldives were paradise, crystal waters, white sand, and the delicious isolation of our private villa on stilts over the lagoon. For 2 weeks, Jason and I existed in a bubble of newlywed bliss. We snorkeled with manta rays, had candlelit dinners on the beach, and made love as the ocean breeze filtered through mosquito netting. In those moments, my fears seemed absurd, paranoid inventions of an overprotective business owner. "I've been thinking," Jason said our last evening there as we watched the sunset from our deck. "Maybe it's time I joined Aurora Tech in some capacity." The contentment I'd been feeling evaporated instantly. "What do you mean?" "Well, we're married now," It makes sense to align our professional lives, too. His tone was casual, but his eyes were focused intently on my reaction. I could help expand Aurora's reach through Montgomery's connections. Aurora is doing fine with its current growth strategy, I said carefully. And you have your position with Montgomery Holdings. Just something to think about, he replied, backing off immediately. No pressure. But pressure began mounting as soon as we returned to Seattle. Jason suggested we meet with his family's financial team to optimize our combined assets. When I declined, citing my comfort with my existing financial advisors, he didn't push. But the next week, Bradley Coleman, the Montgomery family lawyer, coincidentally showed up at a charity gala we attended. Natalie, the newest Montgomery. Bradley greeted me with a too familiar embrace. We need to schedule that sit-down soon. There are some excellent opportunities for Aurora Tech within the Montgomery portfolio. Before I could respond, Jason guided Bradley toward the bar. Let's get you a drink first, Brad. Shop talk can wait. Later that week, Jason arranged a business dinner with Bradley without consulting me. Throughout the meal, Bradley asked pointed questions about Aurora's client contracts, retention rates, and intellectual property protections. I answered vaguely, growing increasingly uncomfortable. We should really get Aurora's systems integrated with Montgomery's operations, Bradley said as dessert arrived. For efficiency. Aurora systems remain independent, I stated firmly. That's non-negotiable. The drive home was tense. As soon as our front door closed, Jason confronted me. Why are you being so difficult about this? Brad's just trying to help streamline things. Streamlining usually means absorption in the Montgomery vocabulary, I countered. I built Aurora from nothing. I'm not handing over control. We're family now, Jason said, his voice rising. There shouldn't be secrets or separate operations. That's not how the Montgomerys work. I'm not a Montgomery. I'm a Parker who married a Montgomery. There's a difference. That first major fight ended with Jason sleeping in the guest room. The next morning he apologized, acknowledging that he had pushed too hard too fast. I accepted his apology, but the incident left me watchful. Rebecca instituted mandatory Sunday family dinners at the Montgomery mansion. Each week I sat through subtle digs about modern women who don't understand family business traditions, and pointed questions about Aurora's latest contracts. Westlake Medical Group signed with you. Interesting, Gerald commented one Sunday. They were considering our hotel for their annual conference, Small World. The following week, Westlake Medical canceled their cybersecurity contract with Aurora, citing a strategic partnership with another provider. When I investigated, I discovered they had received significantly discounted rates at Montgomery hotels in exchange for using a security firm owned by one of Gerald's golf buddies. My relationship with Amanda deepened during these family gatherings. We often escaped to the garden or kitchen, ostensibly to help with dinner, but really to avoid the business interrogations. It was the same with my company, Amanda confided one evening while we loaded the dishwasher. Small things at first, then suggestions to integrate with Montgomery's operations for mutual benefit. What happened? I asked, though I suspected the answer. Sophia Grant happened. She glanced toward the dining room where Rebecca was holding court. Jason's girlfriend before you. She had a boutique marketing agency. Successful, growing, sound familiar? What happened to her company? Absorbed, stripped for client contacts. Then dissolved, and then Sophia was history too. Funny how she got dumped right after the last of her client contracts were transferred. I felt physically ill. Are you saying Jason was part of this? Amanda's expression softened. I don't think he fully understands what his parents do. Ethan didn't either, at first. They're raised to believe in family first and consolidating assets. The ethical implications don't register. That night, I researched Sophia Grant. Her agency had indeed been acquired by Montgomery Holdings 3 years ago, then quietly shut down 6 months later. Sophia now worked for a competitor in Portland. I began investigating other Montgomery acquisitions, establishing a pattern. They acquired businesses, extracted valuable assets, client lists, or intellectual property, then shuttered the original companies. Most disturbing were the 3 businesses that had come into their orbit through marriages. The distance between Jason and me grew. I made excuses to work late, avoiding intimate conversations that might lead to business discussions. When he asked about Aurora's new government contract, I deliberately gave vague answers, watching his reaction. "You don't trust me," he finally said one night. "You've never trusted me with Aurora. Can you blame me? Your family has a history of devouring smaller companies, especially ones that come through marriages." "That's business," he defended. "Strategic acquisition and resource allocation. It's not personal." "It's very personal when it's my company at stake," I countered. "And don't pretend your parents haven't been circling Aurora since we met. You're being paranoid. My parents respect what you've built. Like they respected Sophia Grant's agency or Amanda's event planning business."
His face darkened. "You've been talking to Amanda?"
"She's bitter because she couldn't scale her little party planning business. My parents gave her a cushy job after it failed." "Is that what they told you?" I asked, suddenly realizing how deep the family manipulation went. Her company was profitable and growing until Montgomery Holdings systematically poached her clients. "That's ridiculous. You don't know what you're talking about."
He grabbed his keys. "I'm going for a drive."
After he left, I called my parents, needing perspective from people who loved me without an agenda. "Trust your instincts, my mother said after I explained the situation without divulging the specifics of my secret restructuring. "You've always had good business sense." "Is your company protected?" my father asked directly. "Yes," I assured him. "Very well protected. Then you have time to figure out if your marriage can be saved," he said gently. "But don't let your guard down." When Jason returned 3 hours later, he was conciliatory. We agreed to table business discussions and focus on our relationship. For 2 weeks, things improved. We had date nights, spent a weekend hiking in the Cascades, and rediscovered the connection that had brought us together. Then Rebecca called with her unusual request for Sunday dinner. "Mom's insisting we come to dinner this Sunday," Jason said.
Hanging up the phone. Says she has some big announcement.
"We were planning to go to the Rainier exhibition," I reminded him. "We had tickets to a photography showcase I'd been looking forward to for months." "I know, but she was really adamant, said the whole family needs to be there." He looked uncomfortable. "We can do the exhibition next weekend." I noticed his nervous energy throughout the week, checking his phone more frequently, having hushed conversations with his father, changing the subject whenever I entered the room. By Sunday morning, my anxiety was at its maximum. "Is everything okay?" I asked as we dressed for dinner. "You've been on edge all week." "Everything's fine," he said too quickly. "Just some hotel chain stuff, nothing interesting." The Montgomery estate looked the same as always. Imposing stone facade, manicured gardens, and the spectacular view of Puget Sound. Rebecca greeted us at the door in a navy blue dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly mortgage. "There you are," she exclaimed, embracing Jason warmly and offering me her cheek to kiss. "Everyone's already here." The dining room was set with formal china and crystal, unusual for a regular Sunday dinner. Ethan and Amanda were already seated, along with Gerald at the head of the table. I noticed Amanda wouldn't meet my eyes. "Natalie, we've positioned you next to Gerald tonight," Rebecca directed. "He has some exciting Montgomery Hotels developments to discuss with you." Throughout the appetizer course, a delicate crab bisque, Gerald dominated the conversation with tales of their newest hotel acquisition in Vancouver. During the main course, prime rib with roasted vegetables, Rebecca steered the discussion toward family legacy and consolidating strengths. "The Montgomery name carries weight in this region," she said, refilling wine glasses. "Everything we do must reinforce and build upon that foundation." I noticed Jason barely touching his food, his knee bouncing nervously under the table. Ethan seemed equally tense, while Amanda maintained a studied focus on her plate. After dessert, Rebecca's signature chocolate soufflé, she clinked her spoon against her water glass. "Before coffee, we have some family business to discuss." She rose and walked to the sideboard, returning with a leather portfolio. "Natalie, dear, this concerns you most directly." She placed the portfolio in front of me and opened it to reveal a stack of legal documents, post-it notes marking signature lines. These are transfer documents for Aurora Tech assets into Montgomery Holdings, she explained with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. We've created a special division that you'll head. Of course, this is merely a formality to properly integrate Aurora into the family business structure. I stared at the documents, my heart pounding. Integration? This is the first I'm hearing. Of any integration, Jason didn't mention it. We've been planning this for months, Rebecca's voice carried faint surprise. It's for tax purposes primarily, and liability protection. I glanced at Jason, who looked conflicted but not shocked. This wasn't news to him. I've taken the liberty of having our notary wait in Gerald's study, Rebecca continued smoothly. We can finalize everything tonight. Such a relief to have all the paperwork behind us. I flipped through the documents quickly, recognizing what they actually were: not mere integration papers, but a complete transfer of ownership and control. Aurora Tech would become wholly owned by Montgomery Holdings, with me as a salaried executive with no controlling interest. This isn't an integration, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. This is appropriation. You're asking me to sign away my company. Rebecca's smile tightened. That's unnecessarily dramatic, dear. We're welcoming Aurora into the Montgomery family of businesses, just as we've welcomed you into our family. I won't be signing these. I closed the portfolio and pushed it away. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Rebecca's pleasant mask slipped, revealing the steel beneath. Perhaps you don't understand the opportunity we're offering, Gerald interjected. Montgomery Holdings can take Aurora Tech global. Without us, you'll remain a regional player at best. Aurora is doing fine without Montgomery interference, I replied. We've doubled our revenue this year and expanded to 3 new states. Yes, about that expansion, Rebecca said coldly. Several of your new clients might be reconsidering their contracts soon. Market forces, you understand. Are you threatening my business? Of course not, Gerald said smoothly. Rebecca's simply pointing out the advantages of having the Montgomery name behind you rather than in opposition. I turned to Jason. Did you know about this? His eyes darted between me and his parents. I knew they wanted to discuss integration. I didn't know they'd prepared documents already. Don't lie to your wife, Jason, Rebecca scolded. We've been discussing this since before the engagement. It was always the plan. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. I stood up my chair, scraping loudly on the hardwood floor. I need to leave now. Jason followed me as I grabbed my coat and purse. Rebecca called after us. The notary has cleared his evening, Natalie. Don't be impulsive. In the car, the tension was suffocating. I drove in silence for several minutes before Jason spoke. They mean well, he began weakly. They just want to strengthen the family business by destroying mine. I took a sharp turn, making him grab the dashboard. How long have you been planning this ambush? His silence was answer enough. Did you marry me for my company, Jason?
No, he seemed
genuinely hurt by the suggestion. I love you, Natalie, but family expectations are complicated. So you love me, but you're okay with your parents stripping me of everything I've built. They wouldn't do that. They'd give you an executive position, equity options like they did with Amanda or Sophia Grant. He fell silent again.
Answer.
Me this honestly, Jason. Was I targeted? Did you approach me at that conference specifically because of Aurora Tech? His hesitation told me everything. Initially, yes, he finally admitted. Dad identified your company as a potential acquisition. But I fell in love with you for real, Natalie. That wasn't fake. We pulled into our driveway, but I didn't turn off the engine. I can't stay here tonight. Where are you going? To call Margaret Bennett and to decide whether this marriage is salvageable. I've never felt more alone than that night sitting in my car outside Margaret's office building, waiting for her to arrive. If you've ever had that moment where you discover someone you love has betrayed you, you know that hollow feeling in your chest. Looking back, I'm still grateful for everyone who subscribed to hear these stories about family loyalty and betrayal. Your support reminds me I'm not alone in these experiences. Now, let me tell you what happened next, because this is where I had to decide whether to run or fight. Margaret's office lights burned until 3 a.m. that night. We reviewed the documents I'd photographed with my phone at the Montgomery dinner, confirming my worst fears. This isn't just an ownership transfer, Margaret said, examining the images on her computer screen. They've structured this to give them immediate access to all Aurora's intellectual property, client contracts, and proprietary processes. Can they force this? Not without your signature, but... She removed her glasses, rubbing the bridge of her nose. I've received reports from 3 of your major clients today. They're considering terminating their contracts. Rebecca mentioned something about that at dinner. They're already moving against Aurora. Margaret nodded grimly.
The Montgomerys.
Don't like to lose. We need to assemble the team first thing tomorrow. I spent the night on Margaret's office couch, too wired to sleep. By 7 a.m., I had emails from 2 clients confirming they were terminating our services, citing competitive pressures. One specifically mentioned a significant discount offered by a Montgomery-affiliated security firm. By 9 a.m., Aurora's leadership team had gathered in our conference room. I explained the situation without mentioning my marital problems, just that Montgomery Holdings was attempting a hostile takeover. They're targeting our clients and will likely go after our talent next, I told the concerned faces around the table. We need to implement the Fortress Protocol. The Fortress Protocol was a contingency plan we developed years earlier after a competitor tried to poach our best engineers. It involved reaching out to all clients personally, securing key staff with retention bonuses, and temporarily relocating critical intellectual property to secure servers. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from Jason, apologies, explanations. Pleased to talk. I ignored them all, focusing on saving my company. Around noon, Rebecca called. I put her on speaker so Margaret could listen. Natalie, dear, yesterday got a bit heated, she began, her voice honey-sweet again. Family discussions can become passionate. Perhaps we could meet for lunch to discuss this more calmly. I'm rather busy today, dealing with the clients you've been pressuring to drop Aurora, I replied. A moment of silence, then her tone hardened. Business is business, Natalie. The Montgomery organization has relationships throughout this region that go back generations. Aurora Tech is a lovely little startup, but it's out of its league. Sign the transfer papers and you'll have a guaranteed position with excellent compensation. And if I don't, then I'm afraid Aurora Tech won't exist in 6 months. And that would be such a waste of your talent, she paused. Jason is quite distraught, by the way. Family means everything to him. Apparently, business means more to you than family if you're willing to destroy your son's marriage for an acquisition. Don't be dramatic. Jason understands his responsibilities to the Montgomery legacy. Her voice became icier. You have until Friday to reconsider. After that, we stop playing nice. After she hung up, Margaret looked at me with raised eyebrows. She actually threatened you directly. That's useful. How so? It establishes intent if we need to pursue legal action for tortious interference. By evening, I was emotionally and physically exhausted but had made progress. We'd spoken directly with 15 key clients, secured commitments from our essential personnel, and documented all instances of Montgomery interference. I finally returned home around 8 p.m., unsure what to expect. Jason was waiting in the living room, looking as tired as I felt. I've been worried sick, he said, standing as I entered. You wouldn't answer my calls. I was saving my company from your family's attack, I replied, dropping my bag on the counter. Something you were apparently aware of from the beginning. It's not like that. He ran his hands through his hair. When Dad first identified Aura as a potential acquisition target, yes, I was asked to make contact, but I fell in love with you, Natalie. That's real. And yet you said nothing when they prepared documents to strip me of my company. I thought they would negotiate fairly, present a proper merger proposal, not ... He gestured vaguely. Mom went too far. I told her that. Too far? I laughed bitterly. Jason, your family is systematically attacking my clients. This isn't a negotiation tactic. It's corporate warfare. I didn't know they'd do that, he insisted. I'll talk to them. Make them stop. I studied his face, trying to determine if he was naive or just a good liar. Do you even understand what your family does? How they operate? They're aggressive business people, strategic. They're predators. They've done this before, to Amanda's company, to Sophia Grant's agency.
He flinched at Sophia's name. That was different. Was it?
Or is this the Montgomery family playbook? Marry into promising companies, absorb them into the empire, then discard the founders. That's not fair, he protested. I love you. This isn't about business for me. Then prove it. Help me protect Aurora from your family. The conflict played across his face. I can't betray my family, Natalie, but betraying your wife is fine. I grabbed my bag again. I'm staying at a hotel tonight. I need space to think. The next morning, I met Amanda for coffee at a small cafe far from Montgomery territory. She arrived wearing large sunglasses and a baseball cap, glancing nervously around the room. Ethan doesn't know I'm here, she explained, removing her sunglasses. After last night's dinner disaster, Rebecca's on the warpath. I need to understand what I'm up against, I said. You've seen this happen before, Amanda nodded. 3 times that I know of. The pattern is always the same. Identify promising companies that complement Montgomery Holdings. Arrange introductions to single family members, encourage relationships. Then absorb the companies after marriage. And Jason, how involved is he? She hesitated. Jason's complicated. He's genuinely kind, but desperate for his parents' approval. I don't think he fully understands the damage they do. I need evidence of their tactics, I said. Something concrete to protect Aurora. Amanda glanced around again, then slid a USB drive across the table. Emails between Gerald, Rebecca, and Bradley Coleman discussing acquisition strategies, including Aurora Tech and 2 previous companies they targeted through marriages. I stared at the drive. How did you get this? Ethan's not careful with his passwords, and I used to manage the family's IT before they demoted me to event planning. A small, satisfied smile. They forget that the party planner has access to all the family devices during events. That USB drive was dynamite. Back at Margaret's office, we reviewed dozens of emails outlining the Montgomery strategy for acquiring Aurora Tech, first through marriage, then through financial pressure tactics if necessary. Most damning were the discussions about Sophia Grant's agency and how they had successfully extracted all valuable client relationships before terminating the personal relationship. This is the smoking gun, Margaret said. Clear evidence of a pattern of fraudulent business practices. Over the next 2 days, we documented each client that had been approached by Montgomery Holdings, building a solid case for tortious interference. I stayed at a hotel, ignoring the increasingly desperate messages from Jason. On the 3rd night, he was waiting in the hotel lobby when I returned from a late meeting. We need to talk, he said, looking haggard. You've been avoiding me. I've been busy saving my company from your family, I replied, dropping my bag on the counter. Something you were apparently aware of from the beginning. It's not like that.
He ran his hands through his hair.
I talked to Mom and Dad, he said. Following me to the elevator, asked them to back off. They said they would if you just meet with them to discuss signing over Aurora. Not happening. In my room, he paced while I set down my laptop bag. Natalie, what are you doing? I checked the office. You've got people working around the clock. Margaret Bennett has been seen meeting with corporate litigation specialists. You're having me watched? He had the grace to look embarrassed. Dad has people keeping tabs. He's worried about what you might do. He should be. I crossed my arms. I know everything, Jason. About Sophia Grant, about Amanda's company, about the pattern of targeting businesses through marriages. His face paled. What are you talking about? I pulled out my laptop and showed him selected emails from the USB drive. His father discussing how to pressure Parker into relinquishing control, and his mother suggesting they follow the Grant playbook. With my company. Jason sank onto the edge of the bed, his expression stricken. I didn't know. I knew they wanted Aurora, but not like this. Did you know they discussed how to handle you divorcing me after they secured Aurora's assets? There's a whole timeline. He looked physically ill. No, God, no. I would never. Your family sees me as an acquisition target, Jason. And you're their tool. I closed the laptop. I'm filing a lawsuit tomorrow against Montgomery Holdings for tortious interference and unfair business practices. I've documented everything. A lawsuit? Natalie, that would destroy my family's reputation. They're destroying my company. What did you expect me to do? Please, he begged. Give me one more chance to fix this. Let me talk to them with this new information. Maybe I can make them understand. I studied his devastated expression. Either he was an exceptional actor, or he truly hadn't understood the extent of his parents' machinations. You have until tomorrow noon, I said finally. After that I file. He left looking determined. Less than an hour later, my phone rang. Rebecca, you filled Jason's head with ridiculous accusations, she snapped without preamble. And now I hear you're threatening a frivolous lawsuit. It's not frivolous when I have your emails discussing how to pressure me into signing over my company. A sharp intake of breath. What emails? The ones where you discuss following the grant playbook with Aurora Tech. The ones that outline how Jason should divorce me after you secure Aurora's assets. Silence stretched for several seconds. You're bluffing. Would you like me to read them to you, or should I save that for the discovery phase of the lawsuit? You little dot, she cut herself off. You've made a serious mistake, Natalie. Nobody takes on the Montgomerys and wins. I'll be the first. Then, after she hung up, I called Margaret to update her, then tried to sleep, expecting the next day to bring all-out war. What I didn't expect was Jason calling at 7 a.m., his voice urgent. I need to see you immediately. I have something you need to hear. Jason looked like he hadn't slept when he arrived in my hotel room. His eyes were red-rimmed, his normally perfect hair disheveled. I went to my parents' house last night, he said without preamble. Confronted them with what you showed me, and they denied it at first. Then they justified it. Said it was standard business practice to absorb complementary companies. When I pressed about the emails discussing our divorce, he swallowed hard. Dad said, sometimes personal attachments had to be sacrificed for business growth. Your own father suggested you divorce me for business advantage? Not in those exact words, but yes. He looked away. I recorded the conversation. He pulled out his phone and played the recording. I heard Gerald's voice, initially defensive, then increasingly candid as the conversation progressed. Of course, we identified Aurora Tech as a valuable acquisition. That's business intelligence. But using me to get to Natalie's company? Jason's voice was incredulous. We introduced you. Nobody forced you to pursue her. Rebecca's voice now. And you developed genuine feelings. That's lovely, but it doesn't change business reality. Gerald again. Aurora Tech has technology we want. If Parker won't integrate willingly, we apply pressure. The emails about divorce proceedings, planning that before we were even married. Contingency planning, Rebecca's tone was dismissive. We've done this before, Jason. Sometimes the personal relationships work out long-term, sometimes they don't. Business continues either way. How many times? Jason's voice had grown quiet. A pause. 5 successful integrations through personal relationships. Aurora would be the 6th. I stopped the recording feeling nauseated. They admitted to doing this 5 times before? Jason nodded, looking devastated. I knew they were aggressive business people, but this... using me as a pawn, planning the dissolution of my marriage. I never imagined. Do you understand now what we're dealing with? Yes. His voice strengthened. And I want to help you stop them. Over the next hours, Jason revealed everything he knew about Montgomery Holdings' strategies. They had approached 6 of Aurora's largest clients, offering substantial discounts on Montgomery's services in exchange for dropping Aurora. They had also begun recruiting 2 of our senior engineers with excessive salary offers. They're following their standard playbook, Jason explained. Create enough financial pressure that selling seems like the only option. With Jason's insider knowledge and Amanda's documentation, we developed a comprehensive counter-strategy. First, we reached out to all remaining clients with enhanced service packages and loyalty incentives. Then, we secured our key personnel with retention bonuses and equity options. Most critically, we prepared a detailed legal case documenting the pattern of fraudulent business practices and tortious interference. Margaret believed we had grounds for both civil action and potentially criminal charges of business fraud. "We don't want to file yet," she advised. "First, we use this as leverage." Jason's phone buzzed constantly with messages from his parents, growing increasingly threatening as he continued to ignore them. "They're not used to losing control," he observed, silencing his phone again, "especially not of family members." The next day, Jason received an email from Montgomery Holdings' HR department terminating his position as Digital Operations Director. His company credit cards were canceled and his access to Montgomery systems revoked. "They're cutting you off," I said as he stared at the email. "I expected it," he replied with surprising calm. "They can't control what they can't leverage." That evening, we met with Margaret to finalize our strategy. The plan was to request a meeting with the Montgomery leadership, present our evidence, and offer a settlement agreement. Montgomery Holdings would cease all actions against Aurora Tech and sign a non-interference agreement, or we would file both civil and criminal complaints. "The reputational damage alone would be devastating for them," Margaret explained. "The Montgomerys trade on their family name and image." Jason nodded. "Dad's always said the Montgomery name is worth more than any single property they own." The meeting was set for the following afternoon at Margaret's office, neutral territory. As we prepared, I watched Jason struggle with his divided loyalties. "Are you sure about this?" I asked him privately. "These are your parents we're going against. They stopped being my parents when they planned to destroy my marriage for business advantage," he said firmly. "I love them, but what they're doing is wrong. It has to stop." The next morning, Amanda called in a panic. "They know about the USB drive. Ethan confronted me last night. I had to leave the house." "Are you safe?" I asked immediately. "Yes, I'm at my sister's, but they're in full crisis mode." Gerald called an emergency meeting with their legal team. This accelerated our timeline. Margaret advised moving the meeting up, catching them before they could prepare countermeasures. By noon, we were assembled in Margaret's conference room, myself, Jason, Margaret, and 2 litigation specialists. Gerald and Rebecca arrived, flanked by Bradley Coleman and 2 other attorneys. Rebecca's eyes widened when she saw Jason sitting beside me, then narrowed dangerously. "So this is where family loyalty stands," she said coldly. "Loyalty goes both ways, Mom," Jason replied. "Or was I just a business acquisition tool to you?" Gerald raised a hand for silence. "Let's keep this professional. We understand you have concerns about some business discussions that may have been misinterpreted." Margaret took control. "There's no misinterpretation possible. Mr. Montgomery, we have documented evidence of a systematic pattern of fraudulent business practices, including using personal relationships to facilitate company acquisitions under false pretenses." She proceeded to outline the evidence, emails explicitly discussing the strategy to acquire Aurora Tech through Jason's marriage to me, documented interference with Aurora's clients, and the pattern of previous acquisitions through similar methods. "Most damning," Margaret continued, "are the discussions regarding plans to dissolve the marriage once Aurora's assets were secured. That demonstrates clear fraudulent intent." Bradley Coleman attempted to interject. "These alleged emails taken out of context. Would you like to hear them in context?" I offered, pulling out a tablet. "We have the full thread." Rebecca's face had gone pale. Gerald maintained his composure, but a muscle twitched in his jaw. "What do you want?" he asked bluntly. Margaret slid a document across the table, a comprehensive non-interference agreement. "Montgomery Holdings will cease all actions against Aurora Tech and its clients. You will make restitution for contracts already lost due to your interference, and you will sign a binding agreement never to attempt acquisition of Aurora or interference with its business again." "And if we refuse?" Bradley asked. "Then tomorrow morning we file both civil and criminal complaints with all evidence submitted to the authorities and the business press." Margaret's voice was calm but firm. The Montgomery family reputation would not survive the scandal. The room fell silent. Gerald and Rebecca exchanged glances, having one of those wordless conversations long married couples perfect. Finally, Gerald spoke. "We need to discuss this privately." They moved to another room while we waited tensely. Jason paced, unable to sit still. They'll agree, he predicted. Dad won't risk the Montgomery name being dragged through a public scandal. He was right. 30 minutes later, they returned. Bradley looked defeated, Rebecca furious, and Gerald grimly resigned. We'll sign your agreement, Gerald stated. With the addition of a mutual non-disclosure clause about this entire matter. Agreed, Margaret replied. We have no interest in public scandal if you comply fully with the terms. As the lawyers finalized the details, Rebecca approached Jason. Her voice low and intense. You would betray your family for her after everything we've given you. Jason met her gaze steadily. You betrayed me first when you used me to target Natalie's company. When you planned to end my marriage for business advantage. Don't be naive, she hissed. This is how successful families operate. How do you think your grandfather built the first Montgomery hotel? Sentiment doesn't build empires. Maybe I don't want an empire built on deception, Jason replied. If choosing integrity over exploitation means I'm not a true Montgomery, I can live with that. Gerald approached, having overheard. You're making a serious mistake, son. The Montgomery legacy will continue without me, Jason finished firmly. I'm done. The look that passed between Gerald and Rebecca confirmed everything. Surprised that their carefully raised son would defy them. A calculation of how this affected their plans and the cold realization that they had lost control of both Jason and Aurora Tech. As they signed the non-interference agreement, Rebecca fixed me with a final venomous glare. You'll regret turning my son against his family. I didn't turn him against anyone, I replied calmly. You did that yourselves when you valued business assets over his happiness. We left Margaret's office victorious but emotionally drained. The Montgomery empire would no longer threaten Aurora Tech, but at the cost of Jason's relationship with
His family. Are you okay? I asked him as we drove home.
He stared out the window at the Seattle skyline. No, but I will be. For the first time in my life, I made a choice based on what's right, not what's expected of a Montgomery. That's worth something. I reached for his hand. It's worth everything. The weeks following our confrontation with the Montgomerys were challenging, but clarifying. Montgomery Holdings honored the non-interference agreement, even making restitution. For the clients they had poached, Aurora Tech had been wounded, but was far from defeated. Our first priority was stabilizing the company. We reached out to every client, reassuring them of our continued commitment and service quality. Most remained loyal, and several who had left under Montgomery pressure returned once the financial incentives disappeared. The damage to our marriage proved more complicated to repair. Jason and I began seeing a therapist specializing in trauma and betrayal. During our third session, he fully processed what his family had done. I was raised to believe that family business always came first, he explained, his voice breaking. Every decision, every relationship was evaluated through that lens. I never questioned it until I saw those emails discussing our divorce as a business contingency. You were as much a victim of their manipulation as I was, I acknowledged. But you chose to stand against it when you understood the truth. Healing came in small moments. Jason helping me work through client retention strategies. Me supporting him as he built an identity separate from the Montgomery name, both of us learning to trust again through complete transparency. 3 months after the confrontation, Jason received legal notice that he had been formally removed from the Montgomery family trust and inheritance. He read the letter, then set it aside with surprising equanimity. I expected this, he said. In their world, loyalty to family business trumps everything, including actual family. Does it hurt? I asked gently. Yes, he admitted. But it's also freeing. My whole life was mapped out as a Montgomery. Now I get to define success for myself. He decided to use his digital marketing expertise as an independent consultant, working primarily with small businesses that couldn't afford large agencies. The work energized him in ways his corporate role never had. Meanwhile, Amanda had fully separated from the Montgomery orbit. After our successful stand against Gerald and Rebecca, she filed for divorce from Ethan, citing irreconcilable differences. She moved to Portland and used her settlement to restart her event planning business. Thank you for showing me it was possible to stand up to them, she told me over lunch during one of her Seattle visits. I watched them absorb my company and spent years thinking that's just how business worked. Aurora Tech rebounded impressively. 6 months after the Montgomery confrontation, we secured a major government contract that accelerated our growth. By our 1-year independence anniversary, as we jokingly called it, Aurora was valued at $40 million, a substantial increase from the $25.6 million valuation that had initially attracted the Montgomerys' attention. Through it all, the blind trust and offshore holding company structures remained in place. Just because this threat is neutralized doesn't mean we should drop our protections, Margaret advised, and I agreed. The security measures that had seemed paranoid before our wedding had proven essential to our survival. Jason and I celebrated our paper anniversary with a quiet dinner at home, a stark contrast to the lavish celebrations Rebecca would have orchestrated. As we cleared the dishes, Jason suddenly froze, staring at me with an odd expression. "What is it?" I asked, concerned. "I just realized something," he said slowly. "If you hadn't protected Aurora before our wedding, if you hadn't been suspicious and careful, my family would have destroyed everything you built." Well, my paranoia paid off, I joked, trying to lighten the moment. He shook his head. "It wasn't paranoia, it was wisdom." He took my hands. "And I have something to tell you. I've been waiting for the right moment." "You're scaring me," I said, only half joking. "It's good news."
He smiled. "I took a pregnancy test this morning."
"Well, you took it, but I checked the results. We're having a baby." The shock and joy of that moment temporarily pushed all thoughts of business maneuvering aside. We spent the evening making plans, discussing names, and imagining our future as parents. The next morning, reality intruded in the form of a text from Jason's mother. "Grandchildren should know their grandparents. Perhaps it's time to reconcile. Lunch next week." "How does she even know already?" I asked, stunned. Jason shrugged. "Amanda probably told her sister, who told her friend, who told Mom's hairdresser. The Montgomery intelligence network is disturbingly effective. What do you want to do?"
He considered carefully.
"I'm not opposed to some relationship with them as grandparents, but with very clear boundaries. They don't get to use our child as a way back into Aurora Tech." We agreed to meet Rebecca for lunch the following week at a neutral restaurant. She arrived alone, looking both regal and somehow diminished without Gerald flanking her. "Jason, Natalie." She nodded to each of us. "Thank you for meeting me." "We have conditions," Jason stated immediately. "Any relationship you have with our child will be strictly personal. No business discussions, no Montgomery Holdings involvement, no grooming them as a future heir." Rebecca's smile tightened. "Family and business have always been intertwined for the Montgomerys." "Not for us," I said firmly, "and not for a child. And if I agree to these conditions, then we can establish a healthy grandparent relationship," Jason replied. "But at the first sign you're treating our child as a business asset rather than a person, it ends." Rebecca studied us both, clearly calculating her options. "Very well, I accept your terms." She reached for her water glass. "Gerald may take longer to come around." "That's his choice," Jason said simply. The lunch was awkward but civil. As we left, Rebecca touched my arm lightly. "You're a formidable businesswoman, Natalie." In another context, I might have admired that. It wasn't quite an apology, but from Rebecca Montgomery, it was something close to respect. Today, Aurora Tech continues to thrive. We've expanded to national coverage and are considering international markets. Jason's consulting business has grown enough that he's hired 3 employees. Our daughter Emma is 6 months old and the center of our world. The trust structures that protected Aurora have been modified to include provisions for Emma's future inheritance of my shares, with strict governance requirements to prevent the kind of predatory tactics the Montgomerys employed. Gerald and Rebecca maintain a distant but correct relationship with us, seeing Emma monthly under our watchful eyes. The Montgomery business empire has diminished somewhat since our confrontation. It seems we weren't the only ones they had targeted using questionable methods, and our stand emboldened others to push back. As I look back on our journey, I'm profoundly grateful for the caution that led me to protect Aurora before our wedding. That decision preserved not just my company, but ultimately our marriage as well, giving Jason the space to recognize and reject his family's manipulation. Most importantly, it allowed us to build something new together, a family and business approach based on transparency and integrity rather than predatory acquisition. Emma will inherit not just business assets, but a legacy of standing firm for what's right, even against seemingly insurmountable family pressure. I often think about that moment at the Montgomery dinner table, watching Rebecca slide those transfer documents across to me with absolute confidence that her plan would succeed. The look on her face when I refused to sign was worth every sleepless night and legal consultation that had gone into protecting Aurora Tech. Sometimes the most important business decision you can make is to trust your instincts when something feels wrong, even when that something involves the people closest to you. The company I built is now stronger than ever, but more importantly, so is my understanding of what family should truly mean. If you've ever had to protect something you built from people who try to take it from you, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. Was there a moment when your instincts saved you from disaster? Has family betrayal taught you valuable lessons? Please like this video if you've ever had to stand your ground against someone who underestimated you. And subscribe for more stories about navigating complex family dynamics and business challenges. Thank you for coming along on this journey with me. And remember, sometimes the people closest to us aren't the ones who have our best interests at heart. Trust your gut when something doesn't feel right.